A bound, purple-haired woman in a revealing combat outfit struggles and begs them to stop, pleading that they at least get a room first as she recoils in panic beside the arena. Kuji Mikagami, a 15-year-old boy, is introduced as someone summoned to another world, his stunned face filled with fear and disbelief. A roaring crowd surrounds a giant coliseum as the narration reveals he was turned into a gladiator captive there, casting his fate as brutal and hopeless. The story rewinds to the previous day at his house, signaling an ordinary beginning before everything changed. Kuji returns home from school and settles into gaming in his room as usual, relaxed and unaware of the disaster closing in. He explains that he is just a normal high school boy who loves games, presenting himself as ordinary and harmless. He adds that, aside from gaming, there is nothing notable about him, and that his grades and athletic ability are only average, reinforcing his plain self-image. Even so, he believes he is a pretty good gamer who tends to win no matter the genre, sounding quietly confident. He notices his winning streak has become impressive, and reacts with mild surprise and satisfaction at how much he has been winning. Deciding one more victory would be a good stopping point, he casually prepares to end the night on a high note. A sudden glowing pattern erupts around him, lifting his controller and drink as he blurts out confused reactions and jolts in alarm. In a distant stone chamber, a magic circle flares with booming light as the summoning ritual activates under the eyes of waiting figures. Kuji materializes inside the circle while voices announce that the summoning succeeded, leaving him stunned and unsteady in the sparkling light. He stares at the robed priests in the unfamiliar chamber and nervously wonders where he is, shaken by the impossible scene. Looking at the magic circle and priests, he realizes this resembles the kind of otherworld summoning setup seen in anime and reacts with anxious disbelief. A composed woman identifies herself as head priestess Zaid, apologizes for summoning him so suddenly, and asks for a moment, leaving him awkwardly overwhelmed by her presence. Kuji can barely process her appearance and blurts out a stunned curse, his mind short-circuiting from shock and embarrassment. As she asks whether that kind of reaction is normal in his world and requests his name, he nervously answers that he is Kuji Mikagami. A priest tells Sir Mikagami they will explain everything soon but must do something first, and Kuji uneasily agrees to go along with it. The priestess orders an appraiser's skill check, turning the room serious while Kuji is left confused by the unfamiliar term. Kuji repeats skill check in bewilderment, clearly unsure what they are about to do to him. Before a divine figure, the priestess explains that they must identify the type of goddess blessing he received when he came to this world, making the test sound crucial. The priests are startled by the results and demand to know what they mean, their alarm signaling that something is very wrong. A priest stammers that Kuji's skills are the problem, panicking before he can even finish the thought. The appraisal panel shows every starting slot as no skill, and the priests announce in disbelief that he does not have a single starting skill. They then reveal his blessing skill is copy, shifting the room from shock to puzzled uncertainty as Kuji waits for meaning. The priests fall into uneasy silence around him, making the atmosphere heavy and awkward after the strange result. Kuji realizes that his blessing means he can copy other people's skills, his surprise turning into cautious interest. Imagining powerful heroes, he thinks it may not sound flashy, but that this is exactly the kind of ability strong protagonists get, raising his hopes. While he starts to think the skill could be incredible, the priestess glares at him from behind, signaling immediate disapproval. With a weary sigh, she says she spent the last 1,000 years scraping together power, and this is what she ended up pulling, sounding deeply disappointed. Kuji notices the priest's gloomy silence and nervously wonders what is with this reaction, his optimism collapsing into dread. The priestess suddenly explodes in rage, calling the others fools as the priests recoil in terror at her monstrous glare. Kuji flinches and blurts out confused shock, caught in the blast of her fury without understanding why. The priestess accuses the priests of ignoring proper procedure and says they should have made the mana flow clockwise, furious at their incompetence. One priest weakly protests that he has pulled world-class summons like this before, trying to defend himself despite the danger. Another insists the probability should be the same while a different priest calls it superstition, but their resistance only worsens the tension around Lady Zaid. She snaps back that they should shut up, keep their mouths closed and do as told, overpowering them with raw authority and fear. The chastised priests freeze under her command, their excuses dying out as her dominance silences the room. With both priests grabbed and trembling before her, the enraged priestess forces obedience and leaves everyone, including Kuji, trapped in fear. Lady Zaid coldly orders the others to throw Kuji away at once, dismissing him like worthless garbage while the priests stand under her command and the mood turns brutally final. With a dark, furious stare, Lady Zaid says she finally spent her last 1,000 gems to summon a human with no starting skill, and the others shrink as her disgust deepens. Veins bulging in rage, she declares that even his blessing is a super unique trash skill, making her contempt absolute and the result feel even more hopeless for Kuji. She screams for them to make him a gladiator captive and send him to the Colosseum with the rest of the trash, and Kuji recoils in shock as his fate is decided without mercy. A vast city surrounds a central fortress as Kuji weakly tries to stop them with confused protests, but the scale of the unfamiliar capital makes him feel tiny and powerless. Kuji is violently thrown into a barred cell while a guard stands outside, and the hard impact leaves him crumpled, sweating, and stunned by how quickly he has been imprisoned. As the cell is locked, the guard casually says all right, and Kuji lunges to the bars begging him to wait, his panic rising when he realizes no one intends to explain anything. From inside the prison, other captives watch and silently note that Kuji is being treated differently from the other slaves, making the atmosphere even more uneasy and suspicious. Kuji demands to know why he is in a jail cell, and the guard bluntly answers that he is there on Lady Zaid's orders, leaving Kuji staring down a colder reality. Clutching the bars, Kuji hears that he made Lady Zaid angry and that, as someone born with no starting skills and only the weak trash skill copy, he was doomed from the start, leaving him blank with disbelief. The guard adds that in this country skills are all that matter, so Kuji would have been treated like garbage no matter where he came from, and that cruel logic crushes any hope of fairness. Staring at his own hands through the bars, Kuji spirals in confusion as he tries to understand why everyone is calling copy a trash tier skill, and his unease turns into real dread. The guard waves him off with a casual farewell and walks away, leaving Kuji alone in the cell with his fear unanswered. Kuji shouts for him to wait, but the plea is cut short by a sudden spit from off-panel, jolting him with fresh shock. A servant inside the prison bursts into laughter after spitting toward him, and Kuji jerks back with a startled gasp as the humiliating interruption catches him off guard. The grinning servant says his luck is terrible because he got summoned and ended up with the blessing skill copy, while Lady Zaid sits nearby in the background, and her mocking amusement makes his situation feel even more miserable. Still rattled, Kuji turns toward the stranger and asks who she is, trying to regain control despite his confusion. The servant introduces herself as Julie and says she is a gladiator captive just like him, rattling her restraints with a confident smile that leaves Kuji wary but attentive. Julie explains that she caused a little trouble and got thrown in there, while Kuji remains behind bars watching her and sensing she is far too calm for a prisoner. Sitting casually on the floor, Julie says that since no one told Kuji anything about this world, she can explain it if he wants, and her offer shifts the tension into cautious curiosity. Kuji hesitates and says he does want to know, but his uncertainty shows he does not trust this sudden kindness yet. He awkwardly admits he has no way to pay her, and Julie reacts with surprise as his honesty catches her off guard. Julie says she likes that response because it proves he is not an idiot, then tells him this one is on the house, leaving Kuji bewildered by her unexpected generosity. With a sly grin, Julie says she still expects to profit from this somehow and tells him not to worry, just sit back and listen, making her help sound useful but not harmless. Julie begins her explanation by asking why he thinks he was summoned in the first place, putting Kuji on the spot as he stands silent behind the bar. A map appears as the narration explains that this is the religious state of Bumbledore, a nation locked in a long war with neighboring states but lacking enough soldiers, turning the issue into a national crisis. Julie says that because of that shortage, warriors are being summoned one after another, her serious look underscoring how routine and ruthless the practice has become. Kuji quietly echoes the idea in surprise, showing he is only beginning to grasp the scale of what happened to him. Julie explains that humans summoned from other worlds are randomly granted skills through a goddess blessing, and those with good ones are treated well and asked to become soldiers, revealing the harsh ranking system governing their work. Wincing, Julie says the higher-ups get furious when a summon costs 1,000 precious magic gems yet produces a weak skill like his, making clear why Kuji was rejected so viciously. Kuji stiffens in alarm as he learns that people like him end up being put on display in the Colosseum, and the word alone makes his fear spike. Smiling darkly, Julie says the noble or wealthy person who summoned him gets to blow off steam while he becomes entertainment for the masses, turning his future into a public spectacle and deepening his horror. Trying to process it, Kuji concludes that this whole country is trying to mass-produce valuable individuals through repeated summons, his voice strained as the system's cruelty comes into focus. Kuji then realizes that means he is just a low-tier card in their eyes, and Julie pauses at his strange wording, puzzled but listening. Scratching herself, Julie admits she is not sure what he means but says that, yes, his conclusion is basically right, confirming his worst understanding without sympathy. With an awkward half-grin, Julie offers her sympathies, and Kuji can only stare forward in silence as the pity lands harder than mockery. The narration shifts as Julie says the next important thing is what happens when he loses, and that warning instantly darkens the mood. Against a stark, ominous background, Julie explains that the loser becomes the winner's captive and is forced into serving the winner, delivering the rule with cruel bluntness and making the threat feel terrifyingly inescapable. Kuji repeats the last part in numb disbelief, his face going slack as the meaning sinks in and leaves him shaken. Sweating heavily, Kuji protests that he is a guy, but Julie coldly says even then, leaving him frozen in fresh panic at how little that changes his danger. Kuji goes pale and, trying to grasp the horror of Julie's explanation, realizes in disbelief that losing would mean being used from the other side, and the thought leaves him drenched in sweat. Julie casually corrects him with a grin, saying it is even worse because a defeated man is first transformed against his will, and then forced into a cruel role, deepening his shock. A blunt rule diagram shows that Colosseum duels are usually men against women, making the system feel coldly routine. Julie explains with matter-of-fact confidence that if the man wins, he makes the woman his captive and forces her to serve the winner, treating the cruelty as normal and unsettling Kuji further. She adds that if the woman wins, the man gets transformed against his will, making the trap feel completely inescapable. As Kuji recoils in panic and blurts out the final implication, a grim visual drives home that the winner then takes full control of the loser, pushing him into raw terror. Julie laughs while toying with a blade and says there are skills that can do exactly that, making his desperate hope collapse. The explanation continues over skill icons, as Julie says one ability can turn men into women and another can make women develop male traits, revealing how the arena's cruelty is systematized. Julie burst out laughing at Kuji's horrified face from across the cell, and his stunned silence only amuses her more. Still laughing, Julie says she loves seeing summoned people make that expression, especially when they are not idiots, turning his fear into her entertainment. Kuji freezes as he realizes this grotesque knowledge is probably what Julie meant when she said she expected to profit from him. Sitting in restraints with a smug smile, Julie tells him he should accept reality because his blessing is the skill copy, pressing him toward despair. Kuji abruptly connects the dots and asks why copy is considered weak, trying to find any way out. Julie looks back in surprise and bluntly asks why it would not be weak, shutting down his hope at once. Using an example of one fighter imitating another, Julie explains that a copied skill still suffers from an experience gap because the original user has already mastered it while the copier has not, leaving Kuji baffled. Brandishing her blade, she says no human can properly use a new tool on the first try, so a strong skill means little if the user is just an inexperienced loser, crushing the value of copy. A dramatic silhouette accompanies the explanation that inspired skills only come to those acknowledged by the god of skills, making true power feel rare and earned. Julie says that means Kuji would be copying techniques from veteran warriors whose abilities have divine recognition, putting him hopelessly beneath them. She finishes by contrasting a seasoned master with an amateur who merely copied the skill, making the imbalance sound absolute as Kuji listens tensely. Kuji quietly concedes the point when Julie states that the two cannot even be compared, and his resistance weakens. A dark image of a looming female gladiator appears as Julie warns that on top of everything else, he will probably face Mary the Torturer, a specialist who preys on weak summons like him, and the threat turns personal. Julie adds that Mary is not only a former knight, but also a vicious sadist with a one-hit instant-kill swordsmanship skill, making Kuji's chances feel non-existent. With a wicked smile, Julie says that even if he dies, he will simply be revived through a skill and tormented anyway, removing even death as an escape. She mockingly tells him he has basically no chance of winning but should still do his best, and the casual cruelty leaves him numb. Kuji sits rigid and trembling in his restraints, unable to answer as the full weight of his situation sinks in. In fragmented panic, he thinks through the nightmare that he was summoned like a random gacha pull thrown toward death in the Colosseum, and unable to escape even by dying, leaving him mentally cornered. Clutching his face, Kuji breaks down over the realization that his entire life is being treated like some kind of game decided by chance, and outrage begins to replace fear. Julie pauses at his strange wording and echoes the word game in confusion, not following his sudden shift. Kuji suddenly interrupts as key phrases echo back at him, remembering that this country values only skills and that revival makes death temporary, and a new idea begins to form. Eyes wide with manic intensity, he realizes that battles here are decided through skills, and that even dying does not mean true death, electrifying him. Kuji bursts into wild laughter while Julie startles in the background, his fear transforming into excited clarity. Grinning like a madman, he concludes that of course that is all it is, as if the entire nightmare has finally clicked into place. He declares outright that this is just a game, reframing the terror into something he understands. Using fighting games as an analogy, Kuji says a battle where both sides have identical skills in a constrained space is still just a game, his confidence surging. He points to shooters too, arguing that even 3D long-range skill fights are basically an FPS, broadening his logic with gamer certainty. Julie stares in sweat-dropped confusion as Kuji insists that if he can physically experience these magical skills himself, then they are still just systems to learn. Imagining immersive combat, Kuji compares this world to an ultra-realistic VR game, seeing wonder where there should be despair. Growing more animated, he says that whenever he gets his hands on a new game, he can play for hundreds of hours non-stop, revealing obsessive enthusiasm. As a chaotic image of someone struggling flashes behind his thoughts, Kuji raves that this world has no internet or ethics, and that he can use every dirty tactic, exploit, and cheat-like trick to win, showing ruthless gamer determination. With fierce excitement, Kuji declares that he gets to tackle the greatest virtual game however he wants and discover it all firsthand, calling it the best thing ever as his terror fully flips into manic resolve. Julie jolts in sweat at Kuji's sudden change and thinks he no longer feels like the amateur he was before, leaving her visibly unsettled. Bound in chains, Kuji raises his hands with a grim, focused aura, and Julie senses something like a veteran warrior in him, which alarms her further. The narration shifts to Kuji's past as he sits alone at a desk, and explains that he is just an ordinary high school boy who loves games and has average grades and physical ability. With a game record showing near-perfect wins behind him, Kuji admits that while he is average at everything else, when it comes to games he often wins and his confidence sharpens. Elsewhere, an anxious attendant approaches Lady Mary in a grand room and nervously announces that the final battle is about to begin. Mary lounges in armor and casually files her nails as she listens, radiating bored arrogance before the match. The attendant recoils in confusion as Mary suddenly snaps at him to learn his place, treating a minor issue like an insult and frightening him. Mary's eyes widen with cruel intensity as she fumes that such punishment came merely because someone was sweating, confirming to herself that she truly is Mary the torturer. Rising before the onlookers, Mary coldly declares that once this is over she will get rid of him, showing ruthless contempt. Looking down with total dominance, Mary warns that he had better tremble, calling him useless and making the threat personal. Mary then coolly says it is time to go, and the attendant meekly agrees while shrinking under her presence. Mary strides down the hall with the servant behind her and casually states that the people summoned here are all trash, reducing Kuji's kind to disposable filth. Sneering as others cower nearby, Mary says they are nothing but garbage who cannot even wipe a piece of armor clean, deepening her contempt. Confirming the setup, Mary asks if she is facing another summoned one, and the attendant nervously answers yes. With a vicious grin, Mary says she will cripple her next opponent during the battle and keep him as her personal captive for the rest of his life, revealing savage intent. The attendant, sweating heavily, mutters to himself that he feels sorry for the summoned victim, showing powerless sympathy. A wide shot of the roaring Colosseum frames the servant's thought that Kuji will be forced to fight a woman like her, making the scale of the ordeal feel crushing. The crowd erupts in noisy excitement as the arena atmosphere turns feverish and bloodthirsty. A cat-eared announcer enthusiastically opens the event by declaring that it is time for today's final battle, whipping up the audience. Gesturing grandly toward the arena, the announcer proclaims that the two gladiators are taking the stage, raising anticipation. Mary is introduced in a regal pose as a former landlot family knight whose torture-like attacks are notoriously fierce, and whose 20-battle undefeated record makes her seem terrifyingly dominant. Seated like a queen, Mary is formally named Mary Landlot, the Knight of Flames, reinforcing her status and menace. The audience howls for violence, shouting for Mary to burn him and begging to hear another weakling scream today, exposing the arena's cruelty. Kuji is presented alone and unarmed in the arena as the announcer declares him Kuji Mikagami, a summoned boy provided by head priestess Lady Zaid, while the crowd mocks him as just a kid with no weapon. The announcer adds that Kuji was chosen for the honor of the final battle and that the Zaid family handed him over for free, while teasing that his skill is something remarkable. A dramatic skill icon appears as the announcer reveals the truth that Kuji's ability is the weakest skill of all, copy, turning the build-up into humiliation. Spectators fall into stunned silence for a beat, as the absurd weakness of Kuji's skill sinks in across the arena. The silence breaks into vicious laughter as the crowd calls him a no-hoper and mocks his terrible luck, turning him into a public joke. Standing in the ring amid jeers to leave, Kuji is exposed as having a skill that can only copy the opponent's skill, and the explanation invites even more contempt. The announcer drives the mockery further by saying the copied ability never reaches the original's level and is merely an inferior imitation, making Kuji sound hopeless. Seen from above, Kuji is described as the summoned one who drew the short straw, branding him as a sacrificial loser. A close-up on Kuji's face wonders what Mikagami must be feeling now that he has been chosen as a gladiator, framing him in tense silence. In the stands, spectators sneer toward the Zaid's side and mock how it must feel to watch 1,000 gems turn into a pile of pebbles, ridiculing Kuji as a wasted investment. Head Priestess Zaid clicks her tongue in visible irritation, her strained expression showing the taunts have landed. From behind, Mary faces Kuji in the arena as the announcer notes that she seems to have something to say, and the moment tightens. Smiling cruelly, Mary tells Kuji she pities him for having the copy skill and for the unlucky fate of ending up in that form, turning the insult intimate and demeaning. With a predatory side glance, Mary's expression darkens as she prepares an even nastier threat, savoring his discomfort. Pressing him down in a brutal show of dominance, Mary declares that a man like him will lose his dignity, leaving Kuji in shock and pain. Grinning with manic delight as Kuji trembles in tears, Mary promises she will take control over him and keep control over him, turning the threat into pure humiliation and dread. The Colosseum roars with cries to kill him while Kuji stands under the whistles in numb stillness, isolated at the center of the mob's bloodlust. A cat-tiered announcer leans into the mic and eagerly asks whether Mikagami will finally respond, sending the arena's anticipation even higher. In the stands, grinning spectators jeer that he should beg for his life before it is too late, feeding the crowd's cruel excitement. Kuji stands alone in the arena with both arms raised and calls out that he will say it plainly, seizing the crowd's attention. Facing Mary without flinching, Kuji declares to the whole arena that he is going to beat that old woman down, turning her age into a public insult. He follows with a shameless grin and adds that after that, it will be time to claim victory over her, pushing the provocation into open humiliation. The Colosseum erupts in a wave of noise as the announcer marvels that he has basically declared he will win, and the shock becomes a roaring uproar. Julie and another observer tense in disbelief, while the announcer says the weakest gladiator has just insulted Mary right after her streak of victories, leaving them rattled by his recklessness. Kuji wears a dangerous smirk as Julie wonders what he is planning and whether he is serious or bluffing, her unease deepening. A chapter card frames Mary and Kuji facing off while the narration calls it a twist that Mikagami, with the weakest skill, has thrown the fight into chaos with nothing more than a jab at Mary's age. Kuji stands casually with one hand in his pocket, while the commentary wonders what is wrong with him and notes that he is still acting completely confident of victory, making him seem absurdly fearless. With a sly look, Kuji abruptly asks to be told about Mary, signaling that his taunt was bait and shifting the tension into calculation. Julie turns toward him in surprise as he clarifies that he wants to know about Mary's skills too, showing he is seriously gathering combat data. Kuji explains that because this is a game to him, if he wants any chance to win, he needs information on his opponents and their skills, exposing the cold logic behind his confidence. Julie studies him and admits she sees his point and does not mind telling him, but she hesitates before agreeing. She then bluntly asks how he plans to pay her and points out that he has no money, turning help into a transaction and catching him off guard. Kuji lowers his face and offers that if he wins, he will do one thing for her no matter what it is, gambling everything on his promise. Julie smirks and notes with amused suspicion that he wants the information on credit, making light of his desperation. While Julie reacts in bafflement, Kuji shrugs that it might be on credit but asks what the big deal is, refusing to act embarrassed. Sitting on the floor opposite him, Julie hears Kuji argue that if telling him lets him win, then she loses nothing, and his shameless confidence starts forcing her to consider it. With intense conviction, Kuji says that if someone who can win with the weakest skill obeys whatever she says afterward, that should be worth more than enough, pressing the bargain with bold self-belief. Julie stares wide-eyed as he calmly adds that he thinks the deal is worth it, leaving her stunned by how seriously he sells himself. She bursts into laughter, admits he says some pretty interesting things, and her suspicion starts turning into amusement. Still smiling sharply, Julie says that for someone with nothing to offer, he has managed to make a surprisingly effective bargain, effectively giving him a passing grade. Kuji lights up in relief and repeats that he wants to hear about Mary and her two skills, thrilled that his bet has worked. Julie, now intrigued, thinks she is starting to like his nerve a little, even if his expression is still unsettling, showing her attitude softening. Over the bars of the holding area, Julie finally begins and says she will start by telling him about Mary, setting the explanation in motion. A tense close-up introduces Mary as one mad woman among many and explains that she went off to fight as a mercenary at 16, painting her as dangerous from the start. Kuji listens while Julie explains that Mary's fierceness in battle earned her the nickname Mary the Torturer, and that all three of her arranged marriages fell apart, making clear how feared and unstable she is. A distant arena view sums up the weakness behind the rage by stating that Mary has a deep complex about her age, revealing exactly why Kuji's insult hit home. Mary's eye flares with murderous fury as she snarls that she will kill him, the taunt having pierced straight into her pride. Consumed by rage, Mary unleashes her attack and screams that she will kill him with flames of purgatory, launching blazing projectiles in a violent burst. As fire streaks across the arena, the commentary identifies the move as Mary's offensive skill, flames of purgatory, and warns that its flames burn forever and would scorch a target to the bone, sharply raising the danger. Mary chases the assault with a furious scream for the little brat not to run away, showing that Kuji's insult has driven her into reckless aggression. She keeps bombarding the arena with repeated blasts of flames of purgatory while Kuji stands at range, forcing the battlefield into an explosive inferno. Fire crashes across the ring, and the commentary asks whether the match is already over under that barrage, making the audience think Kuji may have been destroyed instantly. In the middle of the storm, Kuji slips away with a sudden movement identified as the evasion skill backstep, escaping the blast zone in a blink. The announcer gasps that Mikagami just used an evasion skill and seemed to blink backward in an instant, shocking the arena with his survival. The smoke parts around Mary as the commentary confirms that backstep is in fact Mary's second skill, exposing that Kuji has already copied and used her own ability. Spectators lean forward in excitement and shout that he really escaped by using Mary's own skill against her, and the crowd's mockery turns into astonished noise. Mary looks back over her shoulder with cold realization and concludes that his skill really is copy because he is using her own moves against her, her confidence shifting into grim recognition. Mary glares with twitching rage and asks if that brat still has not gone down yet, her wounded pride turning into open fury. Kuji copies her attack and fires flames of purgatory from his hand while Mary notices with a sharp look, and the sudden imitation unsettles the moment. The announcer excitedly realizes that Mikagami is using flames of purgatory too, but immediately points out that something is wrong, shifting awe into confusion. A tiny, slow-moving fireball drifts across the arena as the commentary mocks how small and sluggish it is, making his copied attack look pathetic. Spectators burst into laughter and call copy a weak skill, and his version a cheap imitation, turning the arena back to ridicule. As the weak flame floats toward her, Kuji smirks and keeps his eyes on Mary, building tension as if he planned this embarrassment. Mary lets the fireball explode on her without even dodging, and the blast looks meaningless against her calm approach. She strides forward through the blast while the crowd notes that she is taking her time as she closes in, confident because everyone knows something he does not. Julie explains that Mary's equipment is immune to fire element attacks, exposing why the copied flames cannot hurt her and making Kuji's attack seem useless. Mary casually says she obviously would not want to be burned by her own flames, flaunting her immunity and pressing her advantage. Kuji stares in sweat as Mary asks whether he understands the situation now, the pressure from her effortless resistance hitting him. Mary coldly declares that his skills are only pale imitations of hers, and not even enough to damage her if they land, crushing him with contempt. Laughing harshly, Mary mocks his earlier threat and asks if that weak display was really all he had, turning his provocation back on him. Breathing hard, Kuji keeps launching flames of purgatory in rapid bursts, but his strained face shows the attack is failing to turn the tide. Mary watches his sloppy aim with amusement and asks where he is even aiming before declaring that this is how the technique should be used, deepening the humiliation. She raises her arm and unleashes the true flames of purgatory in a massive storm around herself, instantly reasserting overwhelming power. Kuji grunts and activates backstep to blink away between the explosions, narrowly escaping as the arena becomes a death trap. The announcer shouts that Mikagami has avoided the attack again with backstep, and the crowd erupts as his survival keeps shocking them. Some spectators panic that he is being stupid for forgetting Mary's armor, while others call the situation rough, reading his persistence as desperation. A wide view shows nearly half the arena already swallowed by flames of purgatory, making the battlefield look catastrophically one-sided. With Kuji cornered, Mary says he looks like he is running out of places to flee and adds that it would be dull to finish things here, savoring his trapped state. In a close, threatening stare, Mary asks if he wants her to spare his life, dangling mercy as humiliation. Mary offers to spare him with only minor burns if he strips, drops to all fours, grovels, and screams that he belongs to her, turning surrender into degradation. Kuji answers with a dismissive laugh and says that is just what she says to everyone, refusing to be intimidated and irritating her. He immediately calls her demand boring, showing contempt instead of fear and puncturing her cruel authority. Kuji lays out her pattern by saying she makes opponents get in total submission while exposed, exposing her cruelty with blunt disgust. He continues that she leaves them burning and forces them to beg for their lives while ignoring them until the judge stops her, turning accusation into public condemnation. Mary, drawn in an eerie dead-eyed calm, is described as going on until the judge declares the target dead and stops her, making her brutality feel even colder. She admits with a grin that his accusation is correct, showing no shame and only satisfaction in being understood. Kuji asks if she actually enjoys doing that, and Mary repeats the question back with amused interest, the exchange turning into a psychological probe. Mary explodes into manic laughter and proudly declares that of course she enjoys it, fully embracing the role of tormentor. As burning victims flash beside her, Mary says anyone who resists her clings to a stupid lie and ends up groveling at her feet in tears, reveling in their collapse. Standing before a giant despairing face in the flames, Mary says she loves seeing fools realize her flames of purgatory will never go out and watching their faces twist in despair, exposing the core of her cruelty. Kuji quietly mutters loser under his breath, reducing her grand cruelty to a single contemptuous verdict. Picking at his face with a creeped-out look, Kuji says that is what she uses to act tough and calls her a disgusting creep, turning her confession into ridicule. Mary jolts in disbelief, and Kuji follows by saying it is no wonder she ended up an old maid long past her prime, stabbing straight at her deepest insecurity. Standing amid lingering flames, Kuji says he is actually a nice guy, setting up a taunting offer while the arena watches in disbelief. Facing Mary directly, he tells her that if she loses, she has to submit and beg, throwing her own humiliation ritual back at her. With a feral grin and a raised middle finger, Kuji promises he will make sure she is dealt with personally and calls her an ancient spinster, pushing the insult into outright warfare and making her rage boil over. The crowd roars while the commentary wonders what this man is thinking and how he is still provoking her even now, turning the arena's fear into astonished uproar. Kuji stares through the smoke with cold focus and says the fight is over because she is already finished, projecting chilling confidence. He links flames of purgatory with backstep and warps through the blazing arena in a violent burst, turning her inferno into his path and shocking the field. A spectator blurts out in confusion at what is happening while Mary's eye widens, her certainty cracking into alarm. The narration compares Kuji's movement to bouncing across the entire arena, making his pattern feel impossible to follow. Kuji keeps flashing through the fire at incredible speed as the commentator shouts about his velocity, and the arena shifts from mockery to stunned tension. One servant gasps that he is really doing it while another watches in disbelief, the impossible tactic becoming real before them. In a recalled discussion, the angel servant says she told him everything about Mary's skills, personality, circumstances, and fire-nullifying armor, then asks hopelessly how he plans to win. Kuji remembers being irritated by her non-stop explanation, but his annoyed look hides how closely he was listening. He confirms that backstep automatically avoids danger and that flames of purgatory remains until dispelled, and her simple yes gives him the pieces of a plan. Kuji mutters that if he can judge the distance, he thinks he can pull it off, while she stares back in puzzled suspicion. Smirking to himself, he identifies the tactic as a combo of backstep and flames of purgatory that amounts to teleportation, showing gamer-like excitement. Mary realizes he is repeatedly evading her flames with backstep and moving almost like teleportation, her confidence wavering as she struggles to follow. She then thinks that as a warrior she should be able to move even better and decides she can do the same, trying to seize control again. Kuji suddenly realizes what she is thinking and internally panics that it will not work, sensing the opening in her misunderstanding. Mary advances with full confidence, declaring his flames useless because her armor nullifies them, while Kuji calls her an idiot as her blind spot opens. In the next instant, Kuji slams into her and drives her to the ground with brute force, and her scream shows she never expected close combat. Her sword skids away across the floor with a clatter as she curses him, the loss of her weapon turning the exchange against her. Mary freezes in terror when a blade appears at her throat, her shock spiking as she realizes she has been pinned and disarmed. Kuji presses the knife closer and warns that if she moves he will stab her, and her stunned question about the weapon reveals total disbelief. The commentator wonders where a mere reincarnator got a real weapon, turning the crowd's confusion into fresh uproar. Leaning over her with a predatory grin, Kuji says the situation is now terrible for her, and fear spreads across her face. Mary stammers in disbelief over how this happened at all, her pride collapsing into panic. Kuji coldly tells her that despite her great skills, she is terrible at mind games, exposing the flaw he exploited. He adds that she still held the overwhelming advantage, rubbing in that she lost despite every condition favoring her. Pinning her to the ground, Kuji explains she only needed to extinguish her own flames and cut him down with the sword, and her strained gasp shows the realization comes too late. He mockingly thanks her because using her own skill the moment he enraged her helped him, making her reckless fury look like self-sabotage. Mary bursts out that his opening insults and his attacks now were all deliberate, and outrage mixes with humiliation as she realizes she was played. Shaken and sweating beneath him, she asks who he really is while also dismissing him as just a mere amateur, clinging to denial. Kuji calmly answers that he is just a normal high school boy who loves games, rejecting the idea that he is some special chosen monster. A memory shows him alone at a computer as he says his grades and physical ability are only average, building the image of an ordinary boy. With a steady stare, he finishes that when it comes to games, he often wins, reframing this battle as his home turf. Holding her at knife point, Kuji asks what she would do if she died here and lost, and the question rattles her more than the blade. Recalling her values, he says that if someone dies they are simply revived with a skill and it ends, while the angel whispers that Mary values honor and would do anything if disgraced, giving him a darker root and making him grin. Back in the arena, Kuji asks what she would do if she died here since neither the judges nor Zaid would stop him, and he could do whatever he wanted, trapping her in fear before the crowd. He leans in at her throat and threatens to publicly ruin her dignity on the spot if she dies now, and the sheer obscenity freezes her in horror. Mary's eye jerks wide with a broken cry as the audience below is shown grinning like monsters, making her feel surrounded by predatory eyes. Terrified at last, she begs him to stop and says she will do anything, her former dominance collapsing into desperate surrender. Kuji immediately reminds her that she just promised she would do anything, his smile turning her plea into a trap. He tells her to remember what she forced others to do until now, and the command drags her into the same nightmare she inflicted on her victims. With a closed-eye smile, Kuji says she already knows what she needs to do, leaving her in silent dread as he prepares to make her submit publicly. The arena crowd falls into a tense hush as the spectators stare down in shock, the sudden silence showing that Mary's collapse has stunned everyone. From the center of the Colosseum floor, Mary lies defeated while Kuji stands over her, and she breaks down admitting she has done terrible things to others and that this loss is hers, turning arrogance into public ruin. Still face down on the ground, Mary blurts out a desperate apology as the atmosphere hangs heavy over the arena, her voice revealing total surrender and shame. The excited commentator nearly screams that something unbelievable is happening and that Mary has surrendered, turning the impossible upset into a roaring spectacle. Spectators and commentators react in disbelief that the weakest has just beaten the undefeated, and the result sends a shockwave through the stands. Mary's face contorts in panic and confusion as the announcement spreads that the one and only Mary has lost, leaving her identity itself shaken. Staring wide-eyed at the blade, Mary fixates on the impossible detail and asks what that knife is, her fear shifting from defeat to baffled alarm. With Kuji holding the knife at her throat, Mary trembles and demands to know who gave it to him, her disbelief deepening as she glares at the weapon. Reeling and drenched in sweat, Mary erupts that she lost and that this cannot be real, her pride refusing the outcome even as panic overwhelms her. The haloed servant bursts into loud laughter and declares that he seriously won, savoring the chaos with open delight. Smirking with vicious satisfaction, the haloed servant says this outcome serves Zaid right, turning Kuji's victory into a personal jab. As Kuji's name is presented, he recalls that he is only average in most things and was so nervous out there. But in the end he says that when it comes to games, he wins, grounding his triumph in cool gamer confidence. Kuji clenches his fist and declares that he does not lose, while his record as the weakest gladiator captive shows 1 win and 0 losses, framing the upset as the start of a new streak. A woman steps in close and takes hold of Kuji, her sudden claim catching him off guard and shifting the tension from battle to ownership. The woman congratulates him on getting a captive, and Kuji's startled expression shows he is only now realizing that victory carries a disturbing prize. Relaxed in her seat and clapping, the haloed servant congratulates Mikagami on his first win and adds that her knife came in handy, revealing she secretly armed him and is pleased with the result. As they move through a corridor, Mary angrily points at the haloed servant and realizes she is the armorer called the Turret, while Kuji looks on as the hidden connection clicks into place. The haloed servant confirms with a sly smile that the turret is indeed Zuul's skill, and Kuji takes in the revelation with cautious surprise. Zuul cheerfully congratulates Mary on her very first loss, and Mary's clenched face shows the taunt cutting straight into her wounded pride. Standing over Kuji and Mary, Zuul tells Mary to feel free to thank her, and Kuji can only stammer in confusion at how boldly she is controlling the scene. With a cruel grin, Zuul tells Mary this is good for her because she always wanted to give herself to a man stronger than her, weaponizing Mary's private standards into open humiliation. Zuul smugly says Kuji is about to go on a perfect winning streak, while the others stare at her in alarm and disbelief at where her talk is heading. Zuul pushes the provocation further by saying Kuji is the strongest man of all and that Mary will be his first, turning Mary's defeat into total symbolic conquest. Bound and furious, Mary thrashes and swears that if Kuji loses next, then both he and Zuul are dead, clinging to rage as her only answer to humiliation. Mary yanks violently against her restraints toward Kuji, but her wide-eyed strain only shows how powerless she currently is. Kuji coldly tells the raging Mary to shut up and calls her a captive, instantly asserting control and stopping her outburst. In a corridor, Kuji questions whether this harsh attitude is really how Zuul wants him to handle Mary, revealing his unease with the role he is being pushed into. Kneeling beside him, Zuul explains that Mary returned to the Colosseum after previously refusing marriage and still longs for a strong man. So if Kuji treats her like hard property, she will become easier to handle, making the strategy disturbingly personal. Zuul flashes a confident thumbs up and says Kuji nailed it, praising his performance as if his manipulation of Mary were perfectly on script. Mary sits bound and blushing with conflicted eyes as the narration notes she is already starting to fall for Mikagami, making her humiliation twist into unwanted attraction. Zuul tells Kuji to stop by the administration office and pick up what he needs, and his puzzled response shows he still has no idea what being a winner entitles him to. At the reception office, Kuji is informed that what he needs is his room key and some nostrum, turning victory into formal rewards. A composed office woman reads the result plainly, declaring Kuji Mikagami the winner and Mary Landlot the loser, giving the humiliation official finality. The clerk explains that because the winner is male, there will be no bodily alteration, and Kuji freezes awkwardly while Mary stands beside him in dark, silent discomfort. The clerk opens a drawer and calmly hands over a room key and the nostrum, treating the bizarre reward system as routine administrative business. Inspecting the card-like key, Kuji is told it was made with a special skill and cannot be copied, and his curious stare shows how foreign this world systems still feel to him. From across the counter, the clerk adds that he may stay in the room for 1 week until his next match and that food will be provided, laying out the practical terms of his new status. When the clerk presents the nostrum, Kuji repeats the word in confusion, and her flat confirmation only deepens his unease about what exactly he has been given. With stark emphasis, the clerk reveals that the nostrum is an extremely strong medicine, turning Kuji's confusion into immediate shock. As Mary sits bound and sweating in the background, the clerk states that at this Colosseum it is a strict rule that while a winner may use a loser as part of the reward, the loser is also expected to force to comply with the system, making the institution's cruelty horrifyingly clear. The clerk calmly adds that some losers try to use money or influence to escape this duty, but the room and nostrum are meant to stop that, making the system feel chillingly airtight. A plain room appears as the clerk explains that on the first day, both of them must drink the medicine and enter it, turning the rule into an unavoidable procedure. The room is shown sealed tight as the clerk explains that once inside, neither of them can enter or leave for 24 hours, deepening the sense of confinement. With a strained stare, Kuji hears that if nothing is judged to have happened by then, they will be forced to take more nostrum and remain locked inside, meaning they could spend up to a week trapped in that room, and the thought visibly unnerves him. Kuji takes in the explanation and realizes this is literally one of those rooms people cannot leave unless something happens, and the absurdity leaves him stunned. Still trying to process it, Kuji blurts out that they really cannot leave unless they go through with it, his disbelief turning the rule into a personal crisis. Standing at the counter, Kuji asks how far outside they can go once they are allowed out during that week, trying to find practical limits in the middle of the pressure. An overview of the fortress city appears as the clerk explains that this is the fortress city of Dungo. Slaves cannot leave the city because of a movement-limiting skill, but they may travel anywhere within it, giving Kuji a broader picture of their prison. Kuji suddenly lights up and declares that he knew it, reacting with a jolt of recognition to the city's game-like setup. As Mary and Zuul are shown, Kuji internally links the situation to gear and downtime in a game, noting Mary's flame-nullifying armor and Zuul's knife, while realizing that people can go out and buy things between Colosseum fights, which stirs his gamer instincts. Kuji politely thanks the clerk, trying to stay composed after hearing the brutal rules. The clerk slides 2 bottle-like doses forward and says that if that is all, they should go ahead and drink them, pushing the ordeal into immediate action. Holding the doses, Kuji stares blankly while Mary blushes heavily, and his bewildered repetition that this isn't strange medicine hangs between them in awkward tension. Sweat runs down Kuji's face as he reminds himself that he is just an introverted student and still inexperienced, and the reality of the situation crushes him with panic. He spirals further, thinking his first real test would be with an older opponent under a powerful drug and observation, and the pressure feels like too much to bear. Kuji admits to himself that he feels more worried than excited, showing that fear has completely overtaken any fantasy. Mary lowers her eyes and blushes as Kuji decides he has to act like a strong man in front of her because she cannot see him looking weak, forcing himself into a role. His face hardens with resolve as he thinks that a strong man would know what to do, trying to imitate confidence he does not truly feel. In one reckless motion, Kuji chugs the entire strange medicine at once, and Mary jerks in shock at his sudden boldness. Mary blushes furiously as Kuji finishes without hesitation, and she reads his decisiveness as a dangerous sign that this timid boy is really about to claim control of her. Hearing a clunk, Mary looks aside in surprise as the reality of being shut in with him fully settles over her. Mary grips her own dose and, flustered and wide-eyed, asks what he is doing, shaken by how quickly he moved. Kuji steps in close with a dark stare and orders her to hurry up and drink it, and Mary recoils under the pressure, trembling at his commanding tone. Blushing and shaken, Mary submits and answers yes sir, then drinks her dose as his pressure forces her compliance. Lowering the empty container, Mary quietly confirms that she drank it, her face tense with embarrassment and surrender. Mary grabs Kuji's hand and urgently pulls him along, saying they should go, while he stumbles after her in surprise. As they move through the corridor, Mary nervously wonders what will happen to her, while Kuji notices that he does not feel the nostrum as strongly as expected, creating an uneasy mismatch. Mary begins shaking and sweating as the effect hits her hard, explaining that it acts differently on men and women, and makes women instantly overwhelmed to the point that even walking becomes difficult, while she bitterly feels defeated by a mere strange medicine. Fighting through the effect, Mary reminds herself that she is the sole heir of the Landlot family and the noble bearer of her clan's flames of purgatory, clinging to pride to stay upright. Kuji glances at his key while Mary internally scorns him as worthless trash summoned and judged useless, merely a skill-copied brat forced into the Colosseum, trying to crush her own growing agitation with contempt. Even so, Mary grudgingly admits that his face might be a little handsome, and the confession startles even her. The drug intensifies and Mary's form tenses as she insists that even then, no man of his level is going to conquer her, turning her denial into a shaky vow. Seeing the room number plate, Kuji realizes this is the place, and the moment arrives with grim finality. Kuji steps into a small furnished room and lets out a puzzled sound as the door mechanism clicks shut behind them, making the confinement real. Looking at the bed, Kuji notes that the room is cramped but the bed is a double, immediately realizing what the space was designed for. Kuji surveys the room and notes that it even has a bathroom and shower, treating the bizarre prison like a furnished lodging. He forces a shaky joke that it is better than a jail cell, but his strained face shows the humor does nothing to calm him. With Mary standing behind him, flushed and tense, Kuji trails off wondering what he should do, while the heavy silence between them grows. Kuji suddenly jolts as he realizes the nostrum, his eyes widening in alarm when he feels a sharp change inside himself. His heartbeat spikes and panic takes over, then he realizes the strange medicine affects men a few minutes later, and is so strong that it can make first-timers lose control, while Mary watches and the danger between them sharply escalates. Kuji looms in a dark, feral haze as the narration explains that those affected are overwhelmed by a loss of control, and his strained gasp shows the drug has pushed him to a dangerous edge. The numbered room door creaks open and Kuji steps out looking drained and shaken, while the rattling lock and his posture suggest that whatever happened inside was exhausting and hard to face. Zul casually greets Kuji from the corridor with a familiar nod, and his embarrassed half-hidden stare shows he is caught off guard by being seen like this. Zul smirks that he is looking good and jokes that he seems like a man now after being in there so long, teasing his ordeal and making his awkwardness worse. Kuji hurriedly says he needs to visit some shops, and Zul dryly notes that he did manage it after all, turning his fluster into quiet embarrassment. Zul says she would have abandoned him if he had stayed in that room for the full week, and Kuji protests that she knows he would not do that, sounding defensive and rattled. Looking at the untouched meal trays, Kuji suggests they go eat at a restaurant, and says she must be sick of that disgusting food too, shifting the mood away from the room and into uneasy normalcy. In close-up, Kuji is told they also need to talk about his next opponent, and his tense face shows the pressure instantly replacing any relief. Over a vast view of Dungo, Zul explains that it is the fortress city and the second biggest city in the world, while Kuji blurts out that the place is insane, stunned by its sheer scale. As they enter the lively streets, Zul explains that the city is overflowing with goods because gamblers pour in money from the Colosseum, and Kuji takes in the bustle with wide-eyed amazement. Kuji watches Zul walk ahead in silence as she reveals that Zaid is a major shareholder in the Colosseum herself, making the threat behind Mary's owner feel much larger. Passing through town, Zul adds that Zaid is only about 9 and serves as the archbishop of the church, making her already frightening influence feel even more bizarre. With shady figures looming in the explanation, Zul says Zaid is tied not only to gambling, but also money lending, assassinations, and captive trading, painting her as deeply rooted in the city's corruption and leaving Kuji grim. Zul confirms that Zaid has power, money, and even an army, and Kuji quietly takes in that he is up against someone far beyond a simple arena rival. Zul stops in front of a building and says this is the place, and Kuji arrives before a shop with a flashy sign, bracing for whatever kind of preparation she has in mind. Inside a private room, Zul says the walls are made from the same material as the sealed room and assures him that no one can hear them, while Kuji admits that is nice, relaxing only slightly. Under the tavern ceiling, they order drinks. Kuji asks if they have energy drinks and then settles for juice when they do not, while Zul asks what he wants, and his odd request highlights how out of place he still is. 2 mugs are set down as Zul says she would like to congratulate him on his first victory, but cannot, immediately turning what should be a celebration into ominous seriousness. As her hand rests near the mug, Zul bluntly says his situation has not improved at all, and Kuji's silence shows he knows the win only made him a bigger target. Zul tells him he humiliated one of Zaid's pawns in the worst possible way and picked a fight with the most rotten ruler in the nation, making the cost of victory land with crushing weight. Sitting forward with a raised finger, Zul warns that Zaid will now come after him with everything she has, and that he is guaranteed to be crushed if he does not prepare, sharpening his anxiety into urgency. From the booth, Kuji asks why she is talking like this and whether it is her problem too, trying to understand why she is so invested in his survival. Zul explains that he used to come to her room every day while she was jailed and even let her borrow his knife, and Kuji realizes that his small acts mattered to her more than he thought. Smirking with a faint blush, Zul admits with a laugh that yes, she is in trouble too, answering his question with a mix of pride and awkward honesty. With Zaid's image behind her words, Zul says she has a grudge and has wanted to crush that woman for a long time, revealing that her help comes from a deeply personal vendetta. Seen from above across the table, Zul reminds Kuji of the promise they made in jail, bringing their old bond back into focus and making the moment feel serious. Kuji, sweating lightly, recalls that he promised he would do one thing for her no matter what, and his cautious expression shows he is now waiting to hear the price. Zul quietly tells him that if that is true, then he must never stop winning, and Kuji jerks in shock as her request turns into a relentless command. With fierce conviction, Zul declares that from here on, he will have her full backing if he keeps winning and grinds Zaid into the dirt, offering alliance and revenge in the same breath. Kuji accepts that he will keep fighting until he is free from being a captive in the Colosseum, and his steady voice shows the goal has hardened into resolve. Thinking of Zaid, Kuji says that without guidance, he would probably just fight her minions and die, acknowledging how badly he needs Zul's help to survive. Kuji smiles with manic confidence and says that if she is giving him a strategy guide, then he cannot see any way he loses this game, turning fear into dangerous gamer certainty. Zul brightly declares okay and says that as of now they are partners, and Kuji looks startled as the pact becomes official. Their hands clasp as Zul vows that until the day they crush that woman, their fates are entwined, sealing the alliance with shared hatred and determination. Kuji, face tensing with a twitch, tells her to get to the point about his next opponent, and Zul begins by saying Zaid still has 3 more pawns like Mary, renewing the threat. A smug servant is introduced as Fine Catastrophe, described as a walking library of wisdom with more than 100 abilities, and the sheer number alone makes the matchup sound absurdly unfair. Another pawn appears as Alice Cotton of the Evil Eye with the skill Spatial Exchange, and her sly pose makes the unknown power feel tricky and dangerous. Zul reveals that the next opponent is Marl Baroque, a superhuman with physical enhancement, and the confident fighter's imposing stance makes Kuji's next battle feel brutally direct. Kuji goes pale as he is told that Marl has 3 types of buffs as her natural abilities and can copy skills as well, and the warning that he could not ask for a worse matchup leaves him sweating. When Kuji worries whether Zul will be okay facing such tough combatants too, She puffs herself up and insists not to worry because she is strong, masking the danger ahead with stubborn confidence. A colossal cathedral-like fortress erupts with a deafening crash, and the violent sound makes the whole place tremble with rage. Inside a lavish chamber, an armored woman lashes upward in fury while cursing repeatedly, leaving the room visibly wrecked. Mary lunges forward with a crazed glare and screams for Mikagami, her humiliation twisting into raw murderous anger. Mary thrashes and howls that he dared make a fool of her, and the memory of defeat drives her deeper into hysterical rage. A dark-skinned fighter notices the uproar and casually remarks that someone is rampaging, and Mary stiffens the moment she is seen. Three women appear together, the bold muscular one grinning, the short servant clutching a stuffed bear, and the calm older one watching coolly, creating an uneasy contrast to Mary's breakdown. Fine Catastrophe dryly says she is glad Mary made the Four Kings, and the faintly mocking praise cuts at Mary's pride. Marl Baroque, identified as 18, laughs that they should be called the Three Kings now that Mary lost, sharpening the insult with open mockery. Alice Cotton, identified as 19, says Mary is an idiot for losing to skill copy, and the blunt judgment leaves Mary stewing in embarrassment. Fine Catastrophe, identified as 24, coolly adds that Mary's skills were simply stronger than his, and her detached logic dismisses Mary's outrage. As the others look on, Fine says that deep down Mary is nothing more than a cat in heat, and the cruel jab turns the ridicule openly contemptuous. Seated arrogantly on a throne, Mary says she does not care who does it as long as Mikagami is killed, and her wounded pride hardens into vengeance. Mary glares in close-up and invokes the name of the Four Kings, trying to reclaim authority even as humiliation still shows on her face. Fine and Alice both refuse, with Alice saying she has no interest in weaklings and Fine saying she does not feel like it, leaving Mary's demand brushed aside. Marl clasps her bandaged hands with a savage grin and declares that means it is her turn, turning the room's contempt into battle intent. From above, Mary reacts with surprise and asks if Marl truly means with her skills, showing that even she knows how dangerous that choice is. Marl leans forward and boasts there is no way she would lose to skill copy, and her confidence makes the coming match feel brutally one-sided. With a predatory smile, Marl adds that she just loves collecting new toys, turning the threat against Kuji into playful cruelty. Back in the tavern booth, Zuul begins explaining that some skills fall into fixed classes from the moment they appear, shifting the mood into serious strategy. Seen across the table with drinks between them, Zuul continues that skills possess a fixed class from the start, and Kuji listens as the lesson grows more ominous. A visual comparison shows that the gap between Class 1 and Class 5 skills is like night and day, making the ranking system feel brutally decisive. Zuul states that Marl's skills are three kinds of buffs, and Kuji's focus tightens as the analysis narrows onto his opponent. Cards symbolize Marl's buffs as attack up, defense up, and agility up, and the simple list makes the danger sound devastatingly efficient. Zuul says buff skills are not unusual on their own, but in Marl's case the exception is what matters, deepening Kuji's unease. Marl appears in a starry battle image as Zuul reveals that all three of her buffs are Class 5 at base, and the revelation makes the matchup feel absurdly unfair. Zuul explains that Marl is already a high-level martial artist, and those buffs multiply her power, toughness, and speed many times over, turning her into a monstrous close-range threat. Turning the focus back to Kuji, Zuul says that on the other hand there is him, and the pause lands like a grim judgment. Kuji sits stiffly with his drink as Zuul says his Coppet inferior skills are probably only Class 2 or 3, and that he is already a skinny bag of bones, leaving him quietly rattled. Over images of his past tricks, Zuul says buff skills are simple enhancements, so he cannot rely on fancy gimmicks like before, stripping away his confidence. From the overhead booth view, Zuul bluntly asks how he plans to win, and the pressure corners Kuji into silence. Kuji stares off with a blank speech bubble, unable to answer, and his expression shows the problem has hit him harder than expected. Taking a sip, Kuji admits it beats him, and his honesty makes the dead end feel painfully real. Zuul suddenly lunges across the table and shouts that he promised he was going to win, jolting him into alarm as he can only weakly say he will. Zuul cools down and reminds him the fight is 4 days from now, and the short deadline turns his uncertainty into urgent stress. As steam rises from a mug, Kuji asks if not yet is still acceptable, and Zuul confirms it is, giving him only the thinnest relief. Slouching back, Zuul asks what it would take for him to find an answer within the next 4 days, forcing him to think under pressure. Kuji smiles slightly and reminds her she said he could ask anything of her, and the shift in his tone hints that he has found a risky idea. Looking up at the ceiling beams, Kuji begins to say that in that case they should start with something specific, making Zuul wait for the demand. Zuul recoils and asks if he really plans to do it with only 4 days left, shocked that his answer sounds so extreme. Kuji argues that if it is possible, difficulty does not matter, while Zul shouts whether he has any idea how hard it is, turning strategy into a desperate gamble. Kuji raises a hand with a broad grin and thanks her in advance for the full backing, showing reckless confidence as he accepts her help. A mug crashes violently as Zul snaps that fine, she will do it despite calling him a piece of trash, and the outburst makes the agreement feel tense and hostile. Zul glares in close-up and warns that he had better win no matter what, and Kuji answers with a calm of course that hardens the pact into a serious vow. The narration frames Kuji's hatred as he swears to crush Zaid for summoning him from nowhere and turning him into a captive, deepening his revenge. 4 days later arrives as a huge arena opens beneath a vertical beam of light, giving the coming fight an ominous grand scale. An announcer leans from the booth and excitedly tells the crowd that today is finally the last battle, and the packed spectators erupt with anticipation. A regal woman is shown as the announcer introduces Kuji Mikagami as the man who secured a miraculous victory last time, building dramatic hype around him. The announcer and crowd revel in how Kuji's sensational finish forced Mary, one of Zaid's 4 kings, to beg in total submission and disgrace, and the arena buzzes with scandal and humiliation. Mary's face twitches in close-up as the humiliating reminder lands, and her strained expression shows fury and shame boiling together. The roaring audience is said to be unusually excited these days, while the announcer asks what will happen in the next match, making the arena feel feverish with expectation. The cheerful announcer declares that because this is Mikagami's second bout, betting is now open and everyone should place wagers while they still can, driving the crowd into a gambling frenzy. One gambler asks if the other even knows the odds before betting on Mikagami, and the exchange carries a tone of ridicule. The answer comes that the odds are Marl at 1 to 1.01, making her overwhelming favoritism sound almost absolute. Another bettor reacts in disbelief at Mikagami being set at 1 in 100 after seeing the betting sheet, and the number makes his chances look hopeless. The gamblers explain that he cannot use tricks like last time because he is facing the strongest possible Class 5 physical buffs, with skill copies only half as strong at best, and their analysis crushes any faith in him. A bald man bluntly says anyone who wants free money should bet on Marl, and the contempt makes Kuji's loss sound guaranteed. A view over the arena notes that anyone can still go ahead and waste cash on Mikagami, and the sarcasm turns the betting into public mockery. In Mikagami's waiting room, Zul stands before Kuji as he stretches, setting a serious pre-fight mood. Zul tells Mikagami that this warning is for him too, and her stern look makes the conversation suddenly grave. Kuji turns with a confused gesture and silent question, caught off guard by her intensity. Kuji thinks to himself that she has been acting unusually cute for the past 3 days, and his surprise shows he is unsettled by the change. Zul explains that Marl's skills are one thing but her personality is rotten as well, and her cold expression sharpens the warning. Zul says the law of the jungle is all that matters to Marl, and that if someone is as strong as she is then Marl will treat them as human, but not if they are weak, making her sound brutally predatory. Kuji blurts out that this sounds just like Zul, then instantly panics at his own comparison, jolted by his careless remark. Zul stares back with contempt and says she simply hates trash, turning his joke into a sharp rebuke. With a tense close-up, Zul says Marl sees the weak as her toys, and the warning makes the threat feel personal and demeaning. Surrounded by grim faces, Zul adds that Marl is sick through and through, leaving the room heavy with disgust. Marl appears in command mode, calling for captive number 1 to come over at once, and the nervous attendants show her dominance over everyone around her. A frightened, bespectacled man opens the door to announce her match, and the ominous knocking and his shaken face suggest danger even before she moves. Marl casually notes that the captive has passed out, reacting with amused indifference to someone collapsing around her. Marl orders captive number 5 to know the routine and heal the fallen one, and the trembling servant meekly agrees under pressure. Marl smacks the older man forward and eagerly says, "Now then, let them get going," turning the moment into a march toward violence. The sweating old man pities Mikagami and says he is a dead man this time, showing that even insiders expect slaughter. From behind, Marl raises a bandaged fist and declares that it is time to get herself a new captive, framing Kuji as prey and making her excitement feel cruel. A tight crop turns to pure menace as Marl asks if he understands, pressing the warning with overpowering confidence. Zul explains that once Marl gets full control, she will dislocate his joint, and the blunt detail makes the physical danger unmistakable. Facing away, Zul insists that it is over the moment Marl gets hold of him and asks whether he understands that, while Kuji dryly thanks her for the warning and shows uneasy acceptance. Kuji turns to say he did not realize she wanted him to win that badly, and Zul recoils in embarrassed fluster at being seen through. Zul's face explodes with shock as she stammers that she never meant that, and her panic exposes feelings she did not want acknowledged. Blushing and sweating, Zul breaks down mid-denial as she tries to say it was not like that and cannot finish, leaving her completely rattled. From behind, a figure is told that today will be his last, and the blunt warning makes the walk to the arena feel instantly grim. Kuji stands with his back turned and says they can celebrate with her form after he wins, and his taunt turns the tension into a reckless challenge. Zul jolts in flushed shock and asks why he would even say that, and her shaken reaction shows the remark hit far harder than expected. Zul lowers her face and thinks that if Mikagami wins, it will happen again, and the thought leaves her trembling with dread and embarrassment. The massive arena appears from above, and its sheer scale makes the coming clash feel overwhelmingly public and ominous. The announcer bursts with excitement and declares that they have arrived, igniting the crowd's anticipation. Both fighters step into the arena under roaring cheers, and the spectacle instantly lifts the match into a public frenzy. Marl is introduced as the embodiment of the law of the jungle, the strongest martial artist and ultimate self-sufficient warrior, and the hype paints her as terrifyingly dominant. A close-up hails Marl Baroque as a swift brawler with 20 wins and no losses, and her predatory grin makes that record feel lethal. Kuji Mikagami is introduced as he calmly adjusts himself, and his relaxed posture clashes sharply with the danger around him. Two crude spectators laugh at Kuji and scream for him to kill Marl because they have bet their lives on him, turning support into selfish desperation. A mob of spectators howls for Kuji to make Marl cry and says they always count on him to turn trash into treasure, making the arena's faith feel greedy and merciless. Marl throws her arms wide and laughs happily, feeding off the crowd as if the violence is pure entertainment. Grinning with wild delight, Marl tells him to look at how excited they are, and her enjoyment of the spectacle makes her seem even more unstable. Marl says they will get even more excited, and her closed-eye smile turns the promise into a cruel escalation. With a savage grin, Marl declares that it is time for Kuji to become her new doll, reducing him to prey and making her intent openly dehumanized. Kuji stares back coldly and dismisses her as a psycho, refusing to be intimidated. Pointing at her with a vicious smile, Kuji says he is the one who will hit her so hard she will not be able to stand, and his counter-threat flips her dominance into direct provocation. As the announcer confirms that everything is set and the match can begin, Kuji and Marl lock eyes, and the silence hardens into mutual hostility. The announcer declares that the battle begins as the arena roars, unleashing the fight at full volume. A sudden cut to the slums shows children spotting Mikagami and shouting his name, shifting the mood from spectacle to a street encounter. Surrounded by excited kids, Kuji is told that Zul bragged about him, and they ask if he really beat Mary, leaving him awkwardly overwhelmed by their awe. Kuji waves and tells them to take care as the children cheer around him, creating a brief warm moment in the rough district. A furious driver yells for people to get out of the way as a wagon barrels through, and the street instantly turns dangerous. Kuji notices the rattling cart bearing down on him and freezes in alarm as the wheels thunder closer. The driver screams at him to get out of the middle of the road while the wagon charges straight ahead, and the near collision becomes immediate chaos. Kuji watches the cart race past and gasps in shock, realizing the danger has shifted beyond him. The children run happily in front of the oncoming wagon, unaware of the threat behind them, and the scene turns frightening. Kuji shouts skill copy as he moves at once, his panic sharpening into decisive focus. With blinding speed, Kuji lunges toward the children after reading the driver, and his sudden burst shows he has copied the needed movement. Kuji snatches the children out of harm's way in a blur, saving them from the wagon at the last instant and leaving them stunned. The children thank Mikagami while others exhale in relief, and Kuji steadies himself after averting disaster. Sweating, Kuji thinks he was lucky to have a valid target to copy so he could measure the speed's range, and his relief is mixed with careful caution. Kuji's form wobbles as he mutters that he cannot feel his legs now, revealing that the copied burst came with a painful cost. A long-haired servant arrives with a bored look and says she is finally done, and her calm entrance contrasts with Kuji's collapse. Looking up at the towering servant, Kuji reminds her that they had a deal, appealing to her while still struggling to stand. The servant jolts in confusion as Kuji crashes into her with a painful slam, and the sudden contact throws them both into startled embarrassment. Flustered and scrunched up, the servant yells at him to get off and calls him stupid while he quickly apologizes, turning the rescue's aftermath into awkward chaos. Back in the arena, the crowd erupts as the announcer declares it is time for today's final match, restoring the fever pitch of the event. A split close-up presents the official matchup as Marl the superhuman faces Mikagami the skill copier, and their intense stares lock the final battle into place. The cat-tiered announcer throws out a hand and shouts for the battle to begin, whipping the arena into full excitement. Marl surges forward wrapped in a blue aura as Class 5 buffs raise agility, offense, and defense, while Kuji braces at range and the power gap sharpens at once. The announcer explains that both fighters begin with class buffs and are now surrounded by a unique class, blue aura, making the match feel even more dangerous. Marl grins over her shoulder and invites Kuji to bring it and take a practice shot, showing fearless confidence as she tries to humiliate him. Kuji smirks that this really suits her and warns that she had better not regret it later, answering her provocation with reckless confidence. Kuji suddenly charges in with mysterious confidence as commentary wonders whether he has a plan to overcome skill copy's weakness from last time, raising tension around his gamble. Kuji recalls that this round gave him time to practice and asks himself whether he should look for someone with Class 5 buffs, revealing the method behind his confidence. In a memory, Kuji confirms that the buffs themselves are not rare, and the exchange shows him calmly analyzing how to exploit them. Kuji remembers being watched by Zaid but saying he has this place now, suggesting that he secured a hidden training ground and grew more self-assured. In training mode, Kuji explains that he can practice all he wants somewhere nobody can see him while someone spars in the background, and he smiles as if his scheme is simple but effective. A weary servant notes that Class 5 buffs are not easy to find and asks if he means by tomorrow, reacting with doubt and pressure at his absurd demand. Kuji thanks her in advance for her full backing, and she explodes in rage at his shamelessness, showing that he forced help out of her anyway. Back in the present, Kuji charges while explaining that copied class buffs are pale imitations made by skill copy and are probably only equal to Class 3 at best, exposing the flaw he intends to use. Kuji narrows his eye and declares that he is a trained gamer, turning the fight into a calculated test of systems and timing. Kuji slips around Marl at speed and claims the buffs are a little different in his hands, making his movement suddenly hard to read. Marl laughs that he cannot fool her and notes that he is even slower than expected, staying amused and dismissive of his movement. Kuji thinks he heard her buffs would only be half power and expected Class 3 level speed, but realizes she is not even at Class 2 speed, and his calculation locks into place. Marl casually decides that at this rate she can just grab him whenever she feels like it, showing that she still believes the match is under her control. A fist suddenly slams into Marl's face, and her eyes fly wide as the unexpected impact shatters her confidence. The crowd erupts in disbelief that Marl actually got hit, and their shock proves Kuji has overturned everyone's expectations. As Marl recoils, the aftermath of the strike hangs in the air, and her stagger confirms the hit was clean and real. The announcer screams in disbelief that Mikagami landed the first attack while Kuji clicks his tongue and notes that he has never even seen Marl bleed before, making the upset feel historic. Kuji calmly explains that he used two different types of speed to accelerate all at once, revealing a layered trick and deepening the audience's awe. The announcer gasps about two types while spectators roar that cool-headed Mikagami is showing true mastery over buffs and beg him to bury her and make them rich, turning praise into greedy hysteria. Watching from an archway, a woman wonders whether he can really pull this off, and her tense stillness shows cautious hope or concern. A close-up smile answers with a dark little laugh, suggesting that someone is intrigued and entertained by the sudden shift. Two men in the crowd sneer that the little cat knows how to work a crowd and mock that she is making it sound like Marl has a chance, feeding the arena's cruel mood. Marl flexes her bandaged hand with a low laugh, regathering herself as if that first hit only woke her up. Grinning hard, Marl announces that it is all right and now it is her turn, then promises to punch Kuji right in the chest, making the threat brutally specific. Kuji jolts with sweat as Marl leans in and tells him he had better defend himself, her savage smile turning the warning into immediate terror. Marl launches forward with a devastating straight punch, her face fixed in wild focus as the attack tears toward him. Kuji tries to cross-guard at the last second, but his eye widens in panic as the punch crashes through his defense and overwhelms him. The blow hammers into Kuji's form and blasts him backward, and the sheer force shows Marl's promised chest punch was monstrously powerful. Kuji hurtles across the arena and smashes into the barrier, the impact exploding around him and leaving no doubt he was launched like a projectile. The nearby spectators freeze in stunned silence, their drained faces showing they just witnessed a terrifying reversal. From above, the arena is dominated by the aftermath as the announcer identifies the move as Marl's baptizing cannon, giving the monstrous strike a feared name. The crowd instantly roars its approval, shouting that this is more like it and cheering Marl's comeback with vicious delight. Marl spreads her arms to soak in the noise as the crowd screams that she is the best and should finish him now, revealing how bloodthirsty the spectacle has become. Kuji lies twisted on the floor in agony, while narration states that the single punch carries all the force of a massive cannonball, explaining why he was so thoroughly devastated. Close on Kuji's pained face, he thinks that he cannot stand straight from the pain and wonders what he should do, leaving him rattled and desperate after the crushing hit. Marl smiles with chilling pride and says the crowd's disbelief is gone because this is the power of Marl the superhuman, leaving the arena under her confidence. Standing over the battered Kuji, Marl asks if he finally understands why she let him hit her, and says she has already figured out how his buffs work, crushing his brief momentum. With a vicious grin, Marl says that otherwise she would not be able to hold back from killing him, turning her restraint into a threat and deepening Kuji's fear. Kuji stares in shaken disbelief and realizes this terrifying state is Marl supposedly holding back, which rattles him even more. Clutching his head in pain, Kuji thinks this is what happens when offense, defense, and agility are combined, and realizes this is far beyond the pain of a simple test. Marl coldly thinks she cannot use him later if she breaks him too badly, and says she will pull him apart one joint at a time like a doll, revealing her cruelty. Marl strolls toward the fallen Kuji, mockingly asks if she hurt him a little too much, and his groan shows how helpless he is. Marl grabs Kuji's arm with a pleased smile and says she has got him, while he is yanked up in panic and pain. Holding him in place, Marl cheerfully announces she will start with his right shoulder, and Kuji stiffens in dread as the threat becomes immediate. Kuji's face twists with sweat and terror as the joint lock tightens, showing the pain has become overwhelming. Kuji cries out in agony as the pressure on his arm intensifies, and his form writhes under the strain. In full view of the arena, Marl wrenches Kuji upward by the arm while laughing that this is it, turning his suffering into spectacle. Leaning over him, Marl says that when someone is as strong as she is, they always hear the same preachy lines, and Kuji can only groan through the pain. As Kuji's restrained form trembles, Marl mocks platitudes about power bringing responsibility and protecting the weak, rejecting them with open contempt. Marl's eyes sharpen with scorn as she asks whether that idea is not unbelievably stupid, showing how little empathy she has. Twisting him harder, Marl says she simply enjoys pulling people's joints apart and declares that anyone weaker than her is her toy, reducing Kuji to an object in her eyes. The crowd watches eagerly as one spectator says nothing beats showing people reality, proving the audience is feeding off Kuji's humiliation. Tears in his eyes, Kuji desperately thinks he does not want to lose, especially not to someone like her, and his despair hardens into resistance. In a fierce close-up, Kuji swears there is no way someone like him would lose at a game, revealing a stubborn inner snap. As the arena echoes with cruel laughter about his crying, the ridicule turns Kuji's pain into public mockery. Still gripping him, Marl mockingly asks where he wants his next injury, savoring his helplessness while he winces. Marl leans in with a taunting grin, tells him to go ahead and choose, then pauses in confusion when he suddenly asks where that is, breaking her rhythm. Kuji abruptly spits in Marl's face at point-blank range, and her predatory smile collapses into stunned disgust. The cat-eared announcer recoils in total shock, unable to process what she has just seen. From a distant view, the announcer blurts out that Mikagami just spat straight into Marl's mouth while she had him lifted in the air, making the arena freeze at the absurdity. The crowd erupts in laughter and jeers, calling Kuji unbelievably stupid yet strangely entertaining even while losing, turning his desperate act into twisted comedy. Marl jerks in stunned silence for a split second, her face blank with disbelief as Kuji hangs before her. In the next instant, Marl's kick sends Kuji flying away, and he crashes across the floor gasping as her reflexive retaliation explodes with force. While the crowd and announcer yell that Marl's kick just launched Mikagami, and yet he somehow survived, the clash feels even wilder and more chaotic. Kuji, breathing hard and flushed, glares back and asks what she thinks she is doing, showing defiance instead of surrender. Kuji's intense stare and words make clear he has no intention of holding back now, and Marl is forced to face his changed resolve. Marl clasps her hands, flushed with rage and excitement, and says she is so angry her heart is racing and she even feels hot, showing that Kuji has truly gotten under her skin. Turning away with a dark grin, Marl says that since he has angered her this much, her mood has shifted from playful to lethal. In a tight, menacing close-up, Marl promises to stack as many buffs as she can and then crush his insides, making her threat brutally clear and terrifying. Marl activates offense up, defense up, and agility up together and declares it is time to begin, unleashing a far more serious level of power. Her face suddenly tightens in alarm as her form reacts unexpectedly, and the confidence behind her power-up falters for the first time. A close-up of her eye and uneasy smile suggests she instantly understands something is wrong, and tension replaces her certainty. Kuji lunges in with a glowing fist and thanks her for the buffs, revealing that he copied her enhancements and turned her own power against her as she stares in shock. Kuji slams bodily into Marl and drives her down in a violent tackle, flipping the momentum and catching her completely off guard. Marl is smashed headfirst into the arena floor with brutal force, and the impact leaves the once dominant fighter abruptly overwhelmed. The spectators jolt in shock as a cry erupts that Mikagami's buffs have triggered and made him as strong as Marl, turning the arena's panic into stunned disbelief. Marl clutches herself with sweat and a tremor, gasping that her whole form hurts, and the sudden backlash shakes her confidence. A tense close-up on the floor and a clenched fist marks Kuji, realizing something is happening, as he questions this strange sensation with rising focus. Kuji grimly understands that this agony is not the pain of being punched, and the realization sharpens his suspicion. Marl feels the effect spreading through her form and senses the reaction centered lower down, leaving her flushed and disturbed. Breathing hard and sweating, Marl admits that her form feels hot and strangely pleasant, and the unfamiliar response leaves her shaken and confused. Standing over her with grim control, Kuji tells Marl she probably cannot even move properly now, flipping the power balance as she reels. Kuji coldly explains that what she swallowed was not spit, and the correction instantly deepens her unease. From the floor, Kuji reveals it was nostrum instead, and Marl's startled reaction shows she finally grasps that he set a trap. Through pain and sweat, Kuji says he had heard her attack pattern involved dislocating an opponent's joints after taking a hit, exposing that he had prepared for her style. Kuji adds that he crushed a candy laced with nostrum, and the close-up on his strained mouth makes the reveal feel calculated and cruel. He completes the explanation by saying he spat it into her mouth while she was laughing, humiliating her and turning her mockery against her. As Marl processes it, she realizes with a dazed shudder that this must be the feeling she is experiencing, and the truth unsettles her. A flashback-like explanation lays out that Kuji knew she would stack buffs after getting angry, but he is baffled about why his buffs were transferred to her at all. Kuji calmly clarifies that he did not target her when he cast the buffs, keeping the advantage while she listens in confusion. He explains the rule that buffs are cast only after selecting a target within range, revealing the loophole behind his setup. Marl's eyes go wide as Kuji states that after ingesting nostrum, the only valid target for his commands becomes whichever man stands before her, and horror replaces her earlier dominance. Kuji reveals he gathered dozens of female buffers to test this effect beforehand, proving this reversal was planned with obsessive care. Marl groans that she is feeling both the nostrum and his pain together, and the doubled sensation leaves her unsteady and furious. Bent over and sweating, Marl admits it hurts but also feels disturbingly good, while Kuji explains that nostrum affects women immediately but takes 5 minutes to work on men, giving him a ticking advantage. Crouching near her with a dark smile, Kuji says he can now do whatever he wants for the next 5 minutes and reminds her what happens to bad girls, making her recoil in alarm. In a sudden burst of slapstick, Marl is flipped and cries out as the blow lands, turning his retaliation into public embarrassment. The announcer explodes in disbelief that Mikagami is smacking Marl's backside, framing the absurd counterattack as unreal chaos. Kuji, flushed with anger and payback, lashes out that this is what she gets for treating people like toys, making his retaliation feel righteous and furious. With a wild glare, Kuji orders her to learn her lesson, brat, as his pent-up humiliation erupts into merciless payback. The crowd screams in ecstatic shock that he is really doing this to Marl, and the arena turns from horror to roaring spectacle. A religious official stares in disbelief and can barely form words, overwhelmed by the outrageous scene unfolding before her. She breaks into outraged protest that using nostrum must be against the rules and calls the act ridiculous, trying to stop the humiliation through authority. She urgently appeals to the judge, but his uneasy answer shows he has no immediate basis to punish it, leaving her frustration hanging. The judge consults the rules and admits nobody foresaw this possibility, so nostrum is not actually on the ban list, stunning the protester with bureaucratic defeat. The official stiffly concludes that Mikagami appears to have passed normal approval and that the item will be blacklisted only after this incident, meaning he remains technically legal for now. She erupts in a furious breakdown, shaking the judge and screaming that it cannot be real and cursing everyone involved, exposing complete helpless rage. The arena roars Mikagami's name in a thunderous chant, and the crowd's momentum seals his shocking comeback. In a wide arena shot, victory is declared for Mikagami as Marl is left collapsed, while Kuji wobbles and mutters that the nostrum is about to hit him too, undercutting triumph with dread. Elsewhere, a quiet woman hears a knock as a bespectacled attendant addresses her as Lady Mary, signaling a shift to a new setting and audience. The attendant tells Lady Mary she will be moving rooms, and her surprised expression shows the message catches her off guard. Lady Mary looks into a new chamber marked Room Level 2, taking in the upgraded quarters with silent wonder. As the door shuts behind her, the implication settles in that if her room is now Level 2, something major has changed in the rankings. Lady Mary realizes that this must mean Mikagami won, and the thought brings a small, relieved smile. Holding that quiet expression, she accepts that Mikagami's victory has advanced her situation as well, ending the sequence on subdued satisfaction. A flushed young woman looks away at Kuji's back and says he can celebrate with her form if he wins, hiding her embarrassment behind forced boldness. Still blushing and irritated, she huffs that of course he should beat Marl too, since he already beat her, trying to steady her shaken pride. Turning away and tugging at her clothes with a creak, she grudgingly mutters that she guesses she can give him a congratulatory favor, showing reluctant surrender. She suddenly spins around in alarm and blurts out that Mikagami won, her face lighting up with shocked realization. Standing small between larger figures, she nervously asks if that is true, seeking confirmation as the room falls into uncertain silence. Marl sits battered, sweating, and breathing hard while Kuji pants nearby, both of them visibly drained as the aftermath of the match smothers the room in exhaustion. The servant jolts and asks if Mikagami already took the nostrum, because both of them are already fully affected, reacting with startled concern. As Kuji turns away, she says he used it during the fight, her clasped hands and wide eyes showing amazement at how far he went. A hand grips a dark piece of candy received earlier, while the others focus on the revelation that it was used in the match, tying the plan to careful preparation. Marl, sprawled and furious, snarls that if the alternative is letting him do as he pleases, then she refuses, fighting against humiliation and lost control. Kuji raises a fist wrapped in buff energy and declares a class, buff, forcing strength back into his form with grim determination. With a savage thrust, Kuji drives out his empowered strike and yells for her to take it, venting pent-up anger through raw aggression. Marl freezes as he reminds her that under Nostrum's effect, his skills apply to her too, and her stunned face shows she forgot that rule until it was too late. He coldly invokes the Colosseum rule that losers get bread, and Marl's sweat-beaded stare turns rigid with alarm as he twists her own world's cruelty back at her. In a burst of slapstick punishment, Kuji strikes her while declaring it is time for more punishment, and Marl cries out as shame and pain pile up. Marl bites her lip and trembles, admitting that the humiliation is making her feel strange, her confusion deepening as her form reacts against her will. The servant recoils in disbelief, stammering about punishment and Marl's pitiful posture, overwhelmed by how completely the feared fighter has been reduced. A dark field fills with disordered cries and fragmented praise about depth, more, and not there yet, conveying Marl's mind collapsing into chaotic overload. In a later scene, Zul appears with a casual grin and says sup, introducing herself with easy confidence. A shirtless, weary Kuji cracks the door open, recognizes Zul, and answers flatly, his tired expression showing he was not expecting company. Zul cackles and asks how many days it has been, and Kuji answers that it is the same as last time with 3 days left, settling the countdown between them. Leaning in with a teasing smile, Zul calls to Mikagami and asks if he is done yet because he still needs to prepare, while Kuji looks annoyed and worn out. Another observer sees the exchange and dryly remarks that they really do love him, reacting to the girls crowding around Kuji with muted disbelief. A serious woman says that Mikagami is preparing for his match and that he only has 4 days left, while Kuji listens tensely under the pressure. A bandaged foot steps forward as someone bluntly concludes that he cannot win the next one, turning the room colder with that harsh judgment. Zul folds her arms and tells Kuji that he is up against Alice, while a lively figure in the back adds to the pressure and he faces the warning in silence. Marl, energized again, grins and says that if he is going to lose anyway, they should spend the next 4 days there together, pressing her clingy confidence back onto him. Without fully turning, Kuji says he is winning next time too, and the girls behind him react with surprise at his unwavering resolve. In a calm, hard close-up, Kuji adds that they should just wait, his composure making the promise feel serious. Marl beams with a flushed smile and agrees happily while another servant averts her eyes, embarrassed by how easily Marl accepts his challenge. Kuji starts to cut in with a low hold on, his half-hidden expression signaling that he has another idea. He unexpectedly tells Marl to come with him instead, and both she and the onlooker react with startled confusion. Kuji's face twists into a sharp grin as he says he might as well give them a little show, and the servant behind him watches his sudden menace with uneasy curiosity. Zul grimaces and remarks that he is making a nasty face now, reacting to the dark turn in Kuji's mood. In Zaid's palace, someone erupts in shock that they lost track of Mikagami, the ornate setting framing a sudden security failure. Two guards apologize and explain that Marl used a Class 5 buff to vanish, and that there was nothing they could have done, looking miserable as they defend themselves. Their superior glares with barely controlled fury while they beg forgiveness, calling them useless as the report only sharpens the anger. A Gothic-dressed servant seated beside a teacup coolly identifies the thing that used Marl, her detached posture suggesting sharp interest rather than surprise. Other elegant women lament that Marl has fallen and sneer that being used by a filthy man like that is disgraceful, judging her with cold aristocratic contempt. A stern attendant tries to stop Alice, but Alice dismisses her, saying that unless there is something worth reporting, this is a waste of time and she is leaving, brushing off the plea with icy authority. The small Gothic servant turns in confusion and blurts out what, caught off guard by the report as the room stiffens around her. In a tense close-up, a worried woman asks whether he can really beat that opponent without any intel, exposing sharp doubt and unease. Another woman grimly reports that not only Mary but even Marl was beaten by his outlandish tactics, and she fears he is already setting up another scheme, deepening the room's alarm. A veiled attendant visibly shudders in silence before the looming figure ahead, showing how badly the warning has shaken even the staff. The Gothic servant's face hardens as she snaps back, asking who they think they're talking to, and her prideful anger makes the atmosphere tremble. The towering palace exterior looms under heavy rumbling, turning her outrage into an ominous, almost seismic pressure. A panicked servant bangs in and cries out to Lady Zaid about what is happening in the world, his terror spreading instantly to the others behind him. In a grand hall beneath the projected city image, the tiny servant stands with crackling menace while a servant recoils, and her presence dominates the entire chamber. One woman says she has given the matter some thought, her sweating face showing she is forcing herself to stay calm before presenting a conclusion. She explains with a strained laugh that her spatial exchange is unbeatable, and that she realizes it now, trying to project confidence as the men nearby nervously laugh along. She reveals she learned from the fight with Marl that Mikagami hires people with the same kind of skill as his opponent and experiments beforehand, and the insight turns her concern into wary respect. Looking down over the city, she declares that tactic will not work this time at all, and her certainty gives the claim a chilling finality. With a sharp grin over the city below, she boasts that she has already bought off everyone in the city who has spatial exchange, showing ruthless preparation and total control. The small Gothic servant angrily objects that he cannot experiment as he pleases, while another voice warns that Alice ends her strongest matches instantly and leaves no time for tricks, crushing hope even further. The focus drops to their feet as the thought concludes that with eyes everywhere there is nothing he can do now, sealing the trap with bleak certainty. The cathedral-like tower rises as harsh laughter echoes, turning their confidence against Mikagami into arrogant, oppressive mockery. A narration box identifies the place as the fortress city of Dungo in the eastern slums, shifting the scene to a rough district under high wall. Street life moves on as the narration adds that just like that, events have already advanced, giving the transition a sudden matter-of-fact momentum. A smug companion laughs that she is probably laughing herself silly right now, mocking the enemy's confidence while the empty streets stretch ahead. Tia Clover, a mercenary who uses spatial exchange, stands with arms crossed and coldly notes that the enemy has no idea someone else with spatial exchange is here, and her calm confidence steadies the group. Mikagami asks how that is possible, his surprise showing he still cannot see the plan. The trick is laid out with a device diagram as he explains that he hired Tia before his match and had her leave the city for a while, then return only after the match ended, revealing a simple but hidden setup. Another companion exhales that it is simple but still hard to imagine someone pulling off such a loop, while Mikagami notes that Zaid assumed he would hire help before the match because she expected to win, exposing the flaw in her logic. A servant clings to Mikagami in admiration and gushes that he is so smart and that she loves him, while he calmly says he only has to keep experimenting until he finds a way to win, turning praise into focus. Tia bluntly says she does not want to tell this to the person hiring her, but declares it is impossible for him to beat spatial exchange using skill copy, and the statement knocks the room into stunned silence. A frustrated servant protests that they have not even started yet, refusing to accept defeat before the test begins. Tia cuts off the theory and says she will prove it, her flat expression carrying absolute confidence. She orders Mikagami to use spatial exchange on her from where he stands, and the group jolts at the sudden direct challenge. When one servant panics that he will die if it hits her, Tia coldly insists he just do it, forcing Mikagami toward the demonstration. Mikagami hesitates, raises his hand, then reluctantly agrees, bracing himself with visible tension. He unleashes the skill spatial exchange in a bright burst, shouting the activation as the room flashes with impact. A heavy block shifts and crashes in the room while the group recoils, showing the exchange has activated but landed somewhere dangerous and uncontrolled. Mikagami, sweating and shaken, asks if they understand now as rubble crumbles nearby, and the failed precision leaves him rattled. Tier explains that spatial exchange swaps the locations of two spaces and removes all matter boundaries within them, making it the most powerful skill of all and turning the lesson into a hard warning. She says she could tear him apart from there, but skill copy's degraded version halves his range, so he cannot even reach her, underscoring the brutal gap between them. Using a targeting image example, she adds that the skill also makes exact coordinates hard to specify, and Mikagami realizes with dread that she is right. She stands unharmed beside shattered debris and an opened hole as the narration admits he was nowhere near where he aimed, proving his lack of control. Another voice states that Alice uses the technique at the highest possible level, raising the threat from difficult to monstrous. The Gothic servant explains that Alice's skill reaches the edge of the arena and always lands, meaning she can kill him in an instant, and her blank stare makes the warning feel absolute. A hand jabs toward Mikagami as the conclusion lands that he will be unable to dodge or attack her, and his shocked face shows the hopelessness finally hitting him. A cold close-up declares that his chance of winning is zero, and the blunt judgment lands with crushing certainty. Two girls stare in tense silence as the verdict settles at zero, their uneasy faces showing no hope for Mikagami. In Mikagami's room on level 2, a worried woman lowers her gaze and notes that Alice is his next opponent, her concern deepening into dread. As someone peeks in, the woman anxiously thinks she should have stopped Mikagami after what Marl said, and regret starts to overtake her. Her collar clasp comes into focus as she turns away in troubled silence, her thoughts tightening into resolve. Blushing, she grips her hair with both hands and steels herself with a shaky breath, forcing down her nerves. The vast coliseum roars under the open sky as the crowd's screaming excitement builds into a deafening wall of pressure. A cat-eared announcer lifts a microphone and declares that the time has finally come, whipping the arena into anticipation. From high above the floor, the announcer faces Mikagami and proclaims that today's final battle has arrived, sharpening the tension. The matchup is announced as Kuji Mikagami versus Alice Cotton, and the formal introduction makes the confrontation feel decisive and ominous. Alice appears in close-up as the announcer recalls Mikagami's fated battles and says it is now time for his third, casting him as a man cornered by destiny. The two stand apart in the arena as the announcer asks whether he will perform miracle number 3, and the crowd leans into the suspense. Mikagami and Alice are framed side by side as the announcer asks if his luck has finally run out, while Mikagami admits to himself that this is all a gamble and he has no other choice. Sweating under the strain, Mikagami fixes his gaze forward and tells himself he simply has to do it, hardening his resolve despite the fear. Lady Zaid sits high and imposing above the arena, watching with calm authority as the noise swirls around her. An attendant addresses Lady Zaid while she coolly asks what pleasure she owes Sir Jessley, her tone carrying bored superiority. A plump nobleman with a cane greets her with oily politeness and remarks on the fine day and the large crowd, masking his intent behind civility. Standing below her box, Sir Jessley notes it is rare for her to visit the Colosseum and adds that everyone has been talking lately, probing at her interest. He looks down toward Mikagami and clarifies that all the talk is about him, drawing Zaid's attention directly to the boy. Zaid twitches as Jessley points out that Mikagami has already risen to third among her 4 kings, and the reminder pricks her pride. Jessley sits smugly among the other nobles and says he simply could not resist coming to see the spectacle, his snickering making the visit feel like mockery. With a shining grin, Jessley asks Lady Zaid how she is feeling, pressing her in front of the audience with calculated malice. Zaid erupts into loud laughter while Jessley says she must surely be concerned, but her wild reaction turns his jab into something she refuses to acknowledge. Wearing a predatory smile, Zaid apologizes and says his joke was terribly funny after he asks what is so amusing, humiliating him by treating his taunt as comedy. With nobles and guards around them, Zaid smirks and announces that today's unbelievable odds are about to be revealed, taking command of the atmosphere. The arena booms with the declared betting line of Alice at 1 in 1,000 and Mikagami at 1 in 125, and the shocking imbalance ripples through the crowd. Jessley stares in sweating disbelief as it is stated that despite Mikagami's 2 miracles, Alice is favored even more heavily than the others, leaving him stunned. A shadowed smile asks why that should be surprising, turning the reaction into a cutting rebuke. As both fighters appear in tense close-up, it is explained that Alice has ended all her previous matches in an instant while Mikagami's copied spatial exchange cannot even reach her, making the gap feel merciless. The The crowded stands reinforce that spatial exchange is not only hard to use, but also impossible for him to aim properly at her, and the spectator's confidence becomes oppressive. A stark declaration states that Alice's victory is assured, reducing the fight to an execution in the minds of the audience. Alice starts laughing on the arena floor as a nearby spectator gulps out Mikagami's name, and the sound of her amusement unsettles everyone watching. Alice suddenly declares that she hates men and brands them ugly, filthy, worthless creatures, her furious contempt turning the air hostile. In a sharp close-up, she adds that this is why she hates him too and tells him not to worry, leaving Mikagami thrown by the contradiction. With a sugary wink and hearts around her, Alice promises to turn him into a cute servant and shower him with affection, turning her threat into a deeply unsettling tease. As her fans cheer beneath her dress frills, the crowd notes that she looks especially intense as a misandrist today, and the frenzy around her only feeds the danger. Spectators sneer that she is a brat and an ugly menace, while others still shout for Mikagami not to lose, revealing a viciously divided crowd. One man yells for Mikagami to take down that ugly little menace, and the hatred from the stands drives the tension even higher. A hand suddenly slices through the air toward Mikagami's face, the abrupt motion signaling an attack before he can react. Alice's strike slams into Mikagami's cheek in a blur, and his shocked eye and twisted face show the hit landed instantly and brutally. Mikagami staggers alone near broken chunks of stone as a huge scream erupts from the stands, and the noise makes the arena feel suddenly hostile. In the audience, one man howls that his legs are gone while another stammers in panic, and the crowd recoils in horrified confusion at the grotesque aftermath. Alice points across the arena and spits that Mikagami is a filthy man, while shaken spectators stare and her hatred turns the mood vicious. In a tight, furious close-up, Alice demands to know what was just said to her, and her wide eyes show she has taken the insult as a direct provocation. The announcer jolts and protests about what Alice is doing already, and her flustered reaction shows the match is slipping out of control before it starts. A woman in the stands bursts into laughter and declares that Alice is too strong, and her confidence makes Mikagami's position seem even bleaker. Another spectator says Alice knows she can win, and the remark carries smug certainty that crushes any suspense. A man laughs at the look on Mikagami's face, and the mockery highlights his battered, humiliated state. Two bystanders flatly tell the chaos to stop and complain, and their detached irritation contrasts with the violence unfolding below. One servant snarls that Mikagami has not even fought back and calls him pathetic, while another notes that he is letting the situation overwhelm him, and their judgment paints him as mentally cornered.